Okay, so in this demo, we're going to take a look at designing a program that uses several different function types. We'll have a couple of void functions, and we'll also use a bool function and one that returns a value. And the overall goal is just to structure several functions together in a program that's designed to calculate the area of a trapezoid from its bases and its height. So what we'll do is declare and define each function that's described in this comment, and then go to the main part and piece together the different function calls that would get this program to function in the correct way. So we'll start by just writing a void function that displays an introduction to the program. And we're just going to call this void introduction. And that would not take any arguments in. When we call that function, that would be a parameterless function call. It's simply just going to give us a couple of cout statements that describes what this program's about. We'll also have a function to check the user's input. So we'll say this function checks the user's input, and that would be a function of type bool. We'll call it isValid, and it will return true if we get valid input and false otherwise. And that would be to take in three doubles, two for the bases and one for the height. So we'll say double b1, double b2, and then double h. We'll also have a function of type double for calculating the area. So we'll say calculates the area of a trapezoid, and we'll say double area trap. And the parameter list would be identical to the isValid function. We're using the two bases of the trapezoid and the height again. Only this time this function is designed to calculate the area, provided we pass through the check that isValid is going to do for us. And then we'll use a void function to display the final results. So that function will essentially be our summary cout statement will be put within there. And that would need four parameters. We'll take in the base 1, base 2, and height, and also the area value that we get when we do this calculation. So I'm going to say displays the final results of the calculations. And we're going to say void, call it display results. And the parameter list will be those four double values, the three dimensions we used, and then a fourth one for the area that we eventually calculate. So at this point, we've declared these four functions that will eventually be pieced together in a nice order in main to get this entire program going. And I'd like to define each of these now too while we're at it. So this introduction function is very simple. It's just going to say cout, welcome, this program calculates the area of a trapezoid. So we'll just put the introduction of the program in that void function, and we can make a call to that introduction function in main. It's a nice style to use. The isValid function will just be a simple if-else pair that checks the values of b1, b2, and h. So valid input would be each of these needs to be greater than 0. So if that's the case, if b1 is greater than 0, and b2 is greater than 0, and h is greater than 0, we can return true, indicating we have valid input, else we'll return false. And you'll eventually see how we use this function to control the input validation loop that we'll use within the main part of the program. Our area trap function will be pretty simple. We'll just declare a variable for the area, assign the correct value to it, and then return it. So we'll do double area. We'll say area is, let's see, we'll use 0.5 for the half, and then we'll do b, multiply that by the sum of the bases, and then multiply that by the height value. Again, make sure you're using these names, the formal parameters we have here, b1, b2, and h, and then we'll return the value of that area variable that we declared. Okay, and then for this display results function, this will be essentially another cout statement, or a couple of cout statements maybe, that echoes those values along with the final area value. And you'll see how we use that in main when we're, again, piecing all this together. So we'll say cout for a trapezoid with a base, we'll say bases of and a height of h. We'll end that line there. And actually, I feel like putting a comma there at end L. And we'll say the area is square units, and then end that line there. And we'll eventually see if that style works when we run this. Okay, let's check our syntax at this point. It's not a finished product, but it's a good time to just make sure our syntax is good. Okay, so now it's time to figure out how all this pieces together in the main part of the program. The introduction of the program really should only happen once, so I'm just going to put a call to the introduction function here, and what that'll do is execute the code within the introduction function that just says welcome to the program. We definitely need some prompt lines in main, although you'll see in the last topic in this unit you can actually handle very nicely user input through a void function. We're not quite at that point yet, so we're going to declare 4 double variables. We'll say base1, base2, height, and area for the trapezoid. Actually, I might collide into that one, so we'll say, we'll just say area for that. And what we'll do is prompt the user, so we'll say cout enter the trapezoid spaces. We'll let them type in both at once. And then prompt them again, enter the trapezoid's height, C in the height value. And at this stage, this is where our isValid function would come in. We know we'd have to ask the user for input if we don't get valid input, so we're going to use isValid to control a while loop. So a lot of students would do this. They'll say while isValid base1, comma base2, comma height, and basically put those prompt lines in there. And maybe see out that there's an error. Cout invalid input detected. And I'm going to run this just to show you. It's a pretty common error in using a bool function like that to control that. Oops, a couple of syntax errors here, there, and there. So we'll run that again. Okay, so let's say we gave this, I don't know, a valid dimension, 3, 4 for the bases, and then 5 for the height, we'll say. It says invalid input detected. So you have to keep in mind the return value of isValid is true when we get valid input, but they want this while loop to run when isValid is actually producing a false value. So there's an easy workaround to this. If you remember the not operator, you can actually apply that to the value that isValid returns. So let's run that again with that change. So enter the bases, we'll say 3, 4, and then again the height of 5. Now it's actually processing things correctly, it appears. So we'll do invalid input of, say, -3, 4, and I don't know, a height of 7. Invalid input detected, and then 5, 7, and 8, we'll say. Okay, so just be mindful of when you use the return value of a bool function to control either a loop or an if statement or whatever else you're using it for. Be mindful of how its return value interacts. In this case, we only want this to execute when isValid returns false, which is why I'm using not isValid there. It's a nice use of the not operator. So when we're past that point, we can safely assign the value of the area variable. So we're going to say area is equal to just whatever our area trap function returns. And we're going to plug in base1, base2, and height, since those are the values, the whole values that the user wants will be stored in those. And then at this point, as long as that area is computed correctly, we could pass along the value of area with base1, base2, and height to our nice little summary function, display results. So we'll do display results, plug in the values of base1, base2, and height, and then plug in the freshly assigned value for area that came in the line before that. And again, this pieces together these 4 functions in a nice way. We'll see the introduction of the program once. The prompt lines, as I said, we'll eventually be able to put those in a function. We're just not at this point yet. The check for valid input is kind of nicely hidden in that isValid function. The area calculation is kind of hidden within the area trap function that's stored in area. And then this call to display results nicely summarizes what happens. So let's see, we'll say bases of 5 and 7 and a height of, I don't know, we'll go with 3. So with bases of 5 and 7 and a height of 3, the area is 18 square units. That seems correct. So let's see, if we add the bases, that's 12, multiplied by the height of 3, and then throw in the 1/2 factor. Yep, that'd be 18 square units. Let's run it again. Let's do invalid, -3 and 4, and like -10 for a height. Invalid input detected. So let's say the negatives were an accident, 3 and 4 and 10. Area is 35. Again, seems reasonable. Run the program again now. So you'll notice the design of this really hides a lot of the subtasks in those functions. You can look at main and just sort of see what's happening in terms of introduction, what's that's doing, introducing the program, isValid, what's that doing, checking for valid input, what's happening here, calculating the area of the trapezoid. What am I doing here? I'm displaying the results. Keep in mind the difference between the ones that are void function calls. This is a void function call, it's its own statement. Display results is a void function call, it's its own statement. Whereas area trap is giving us back a double. That's why we're store getting that double variable. And it's being used as part of another expression. And is valid returns something true or false. It's part of that while loop control heading. So this is a very good demo to show you designing a program that uses a combination of both void functions and value returning functions. And like I said, you'll eventually be able to handle almost every single subtask through a function. We're just not quite there yet. There's really not a nice way to handle the user input part that we have here through a function, but we will definitely get there in our next topic.